The Dean J. Television Show. Hosted by Dean Robinson. And now, Dean Robinson.
It's time for Summit City Noise News. In local news, Fort Wayne City Council has announced its intention to raise local income taxes to finance downtown riverfront development desired by Mayor Tom Henry and select corporate interests. City Council pretends to argue over the revenue matter before introducing and eventually approving the tax increase. Conservative radio news personality Pat Miller, host of the Pat Miller program on WOWO AM 1190, invites his listeners to discuss their reactions to the NBC Sunday Night with Megyn Kelly interview featuring InfoWars Prison Planet founder Alex Jones. Pat Miller admits that he did not actually watch the 19-minute interview, though he did watch some snippets. Miller says he read numerous mainstream media reports about the interview. Apparently, neither Pat Miller or Megyn Kelly noticed a video published on YouTube by the Alex Jones channel on November 4, 2016.
When I think about all the children Hillary Clinton has personally murdered and chopped up and raped, I have zero fear standing up against her. Yeah, you heard me right. Hillary Clinton has personally murdered children. I just can't hold back the truth anymore. Hillary Clinton is one of the most vicious serial killers the planet's ever seen.
I don't know whether or not Hillary Clinton responded to Alex Jones calling her a murdering, raping children chopper. Chobani, the yogurt maker, threatened to sue Alex Jones after he said some pedophile stuff about them. Alex Jones promptly apologized for all that on radio and the internet. WOWO AM isn't interested in telling the truth about Alex Jones because Alex Jones often appears as a guest on the overnight coast-to-coast radio show on WOWO AM. NBC isn't interested in telling the truth about Alex Jones because Alex Jones often appears as a guest on Russia Today. The Russian government pays Comcast Universal NBC TV for carrying Russia Today on Comcast cable TV systems in the United States. WOWO AM is partners in news with NBC affiliate WPTA-TV in Fort Wayne, Indiana. In national news, the Alexandria, Virginia Republican baseball practice hit has yet to be considered a terrorist attack by U.S. politicians and media outlets. Such overt political violence in the United States is rarely considered terrorism when committed by white men like 66-year-old gunman James T. Hodgkinson, who was shot and killed by Alexandria police after he shot U.S. Representative Steve Scalise and 3 other people. On the international front, sometimes truth is the best propaganda. Russia Today reports Afghanistan witnesses growing number of local soldiers turning their guns on U.S. military advisors, with 3 American soldiers killed and 7 wounded in twin attacks in June. The U.S. war in Afghanistan began in 2001 under President George W. Bush. The Trump administration continues the killing campaign that creates direct threats to the United States of America through U.S. military programs that train and arm Afghan men who oppose the U.S. war on Afghanistan. Fox News reports a U.S. Navy fighter jet shot down a Syrian government warplane after it attacked Washington-backed fighters near ISIS's de facto capital of Raqqa, the U.S.-led coalition said Sunday, June 18th. ISIS is the Islamic State, the terrorist group everybody is fighting in Syria. Fox News says the Islamic State has a capital city in Syria called Raqqa. Fox News reports the U.S. Navy says a Syrian regime Su-22 dropped bombs near Syrian Democratic forces fighting south of Tabqa in Syria. The U.S. Navy statement said coalition aircraft had conducted a show of force to turn back an attack by Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad's forces on the Syrian Democratic Forces. Syria considers the Syrian Democratic Forces an enemy of the state. Turkey considers the SDF a terrorist group. The SDF are supported and defended by the USA. The Syrian Democratic Forces illegally hold the town called Jadin. America's Navy says the coalition's mission is to defeat ISIS in Iraq and Syria. The coalition does not seek to fight Syrian regime, Russian, or pro-regime forces partnered with them, but will not hesitate to defend coalition or partner forces from any threat. The U.S. Navy says it shot down the Syrian Su-22, not because the U.S. Navy wants to fight Syria. The U.S. Navy says it blew up the Syrian aircraft because the U.S. Navy is defending Syria's enemies. The BBC reports Australia says it is temporarily suspending its military air operations over Syria after a warning from Russia that it would treat aircraft from the U.S.-led coalition as potential targets. Since 2011, Syria has been embroiled in a civil war between government forces and militant rebel groups that are often called freedom fighters by the United States of America. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad classifies the rebel militias as criminals and terrorists. April 23, 2016, Al Jazeera reports the UN Special Envoy for Syria has estimated that 400,000 people have been killed throughout the past 5 years of civil war. The United Nations no longer keeps track of the death toll due to the inaccessibility of many areas and the complications of navigating conflicting statistics put forward by the Syrian government and armed opposition groups. President Donald Trump attacks the nation of Syria while supporting mercenary armies, rebel militias, and terrorist groups in Syria. The United States of America wages war on Syria while claiming to wage war on the Islamic State. The U.S. Navy shoots to kill Syrian fighters who are fighting the Islamic State in Syria. The Syrian Civil War is the Syrian-American War, otherwise known as SAW. You saw it here first. The Syrian Civil War has been raging since 2011. The United Nations believes more than 400,000 people have died in the war. People displaced are measured in millions. Independent nation-states currently dealing death and destruction in Syria include Syria, Iran, Russia, Turkey, and the United States of America. The Islamic State is also killing people in Syria, but the organization is not considered a nation, but that's not for lack of trying. President Obama's two-part war plan in Syria incorporated launching airstrikes on Islamic State targets and providing combat assistance to Syrian rebel groups fighting to upend the Syrian government. President Trump ordered a missile strike on a Syrian government airbase in response to the Syrian government's airstrike on a rebel base in Syria this month. U.S. military action in Syria usually has something to do with energy pipelines.
Politico. Headline. McCain. Syria strike is 8 years in the making. Senator John McCain championed President Donald Trump's decision to launch an attack against Syrian government forces, calling the action the beginning of continued involvement in the region. This is a beginning, and a lot of hard things have to be done, but without this airstrike, those other things couldn't have been done either, the Arizona Republican said on MSNBC's Morning Joe. After all, it's been 8 years in the making.
The Syrian Civil War began in March 2011, 6 years ago. John McCain says the U.S. attack on the Syrian government has been in the making for 8 years. By my math, John McCain is talking about the year 2009.
News Limited. Headline. Is the fight over a gas pipeline fueling the world's bloodiest conflict? Before the Civil War, two competing pipelines put forward by Qatar and Iran aimed to transport gas to Europe through Syria. Qatar's plans were first put forward in 2009 and involved building a pipeline from the Persian Gulf via Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and Turkey. World Net Daily says Syria is a key energy transit route to Europe. Syria is one of the most strategic locations for natural gas pipelines to flow to Europe. Qatar, home to the world's largest gas field, along with Iran, has proposed a gas pipeline from the Gulf to Turkey that would traverse Syria to the Mediterranean, with the gas then being shipped to Europe. However, Assad in 2009 refused to go along with the plan, instead inking deals with Russia and Iran. Dubbed the Islamic Pipeline, the project may ultimately favor Russia and Iran against Western energy interests. If completed, the massive underground gas pipeline could drastically undercut the strategic energy power of U.S. ally Qatar and also would cut Turkey out of the pipeline flow. The potential for trillions of dollars of energy revenue in deals that snake through Syrian territory may be a motivating factor for the U.S., Russia, Turkey, and Arab states in the current Syria crisis.
U.S. passion for pipelines over and under Syria had endured for decades before Qatar's 2009 pipeline presentation.
Daily Mail headline: Secret 1983 CIA intelligence report suggested America should encourage Saddam Hussein to attack Syria to secure oil pipeline to Med and Gulf. America urged Iraqi President Saddam Hussein to attack Hafez al-Assad's Syria because of the closure of Iraq's oil pipeline, a secret 1983 intelligence report has revealed. The report, by former senior CIA official Graham Fuller, said the U.S. should consider urging Iraq to take the war to Syria, noting that Saddam was fighting for his life in the Iran-Iraq campaign. Through the closure of the pipeline, Mr. Fuller said Syria had a hammerlock on U.S. interests in both Lebanon and in the Gulf. The New York Times headline: Iraq abandons Syria pipeline. Syria shut off the Trans-Syria pipeline in April 1982 as it sided with Iran in the Persian Gulf War. Syria's official explanation was that the transit royalties it was receiving from Iraq were not sufficient to pay for the pipeline's upkeep. Baghdad interpreted the move as a reflection of hostility toward the regime of President Saddam Hussein. Central Intelligence Agency: Bringing Real Muscle to Bear Against Syria by Graham E. Fuller, September 14, 1983. Syria at present has a hammerlock on U.S. interests both in Lebanon and in the Gulf, through closure of Iraq's pipeline, thereby threatening Iraqi internationalization of the war. The U.S. should consider sharply escalating the pressures against Assad through covertly orchestrating simultaneous military threats against Syria from three border states hostile to Syria: Iraq, Israel, and Turkey.
The United States of America plotted wars against Syria because of an Iraqi oil pipeline in September 1983. In 1953, the United States and Great Britain conducted Operation Ajax to overthrow Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh and reinstall the King or Shah of Iran to leadership as a Western ally. President Richard M. Nixon established Saudi Arabia and Iran as the twin pillars of U.S. influence in the Middle East during the late 1960s. Iran battled Iraq from March 1974 to March 1975 as a twin pillars partner to the United States. Iranian citizens removed the Shah from power in 1979, ending Iran's reluctant twin pillars partnership with the United States. In 1983, while Iraq was at war with Iran, President Ronald Reagan tried to convince Iraqi President Saddam Hussein to attack Syria because Syrian President Assad closed the Trans-Syria pipeline. Senator John McCain says the U.S. missile strike against Syria this spring was in the making for 8 years, since 2009, when Qatar introduced its gas pipeline plans. By my math, John McCain is at least 26 years off. McCain's absent-minded math hardly matters, because pipeline plans in the Middle East have been an existential threat to Syria for decades. President Donald Trump officially sends his own invading force to Syria, dwarfing President Obama's invading force in Syria. We have to go to the Christian Science Monitor, March 13, 2017. The 400 Marines dispatched to northern Syria last week to back up U.S.-trained rebel forces battling the so-called Islamic State were plunked down into a war of acute risk and geopolitical complexity that is entering its 7th year. Little fanfare accompanied announcement of the relatively diminutive deployment of an advanced artillery unit and support forces, a mission that brings to about 700 the total number of U.S. troops on the ground in Syria, where a brutal civil war has claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of civilians and combatants and displaced millions. CNN reports, any foreign troops coming to Syria without our invitation or consultation or permission, they are invaders, whether they are American, Turkish, or any other one, Syria's President Bashar al-Assad said. According to The Guardian, Donald Trump's decision to deploy hundreds of U.S. Marines in northern Syria last week has received surprisingly little attention. Unlike Iraq, where Washington is cooperating with a mostly friendly government, the U.S. faces the hostility of Bashar al-Assad's regime, whose removal it still officially seeks. The simplistic idea, promulgated by Trump, that ISIS and its warped jihadi ideology can be annihilated by force is foolish and naive. The Syrian civil war, which also serves as a proxy war between Russia and the United States, punishes humanity on Earth by contributing to the global war refugee crisis. Foreign Policy reports, when the refugee crisis began in 2015, about 1,500 people were coming to Sweden every week seeking asylum. By August, the number had doubled. In September, it doubled again. In October, it hit 10,000 a week, a nation of 9.5 million. Sweden expected to take as many as 190,000 refugees, or 2% of the population, double the per capita figure projected by Germany, which has taken the lead in absorbing the vast tide of people fleeing the wars in Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere. According to The Independent, the German Interior Ministry said about 280,000 migrants applied for protection in 2016, less than a third of the 890,000 applications received in 2015. Syrians make up the largest group of arrivals, followed by Afghans, Iraqis, Iranians, Eritreans, and Albanians, while Germany and Sweden risk civil unrest at home by offering refuge to victims of war by the millions. What is the United States doing? NBC reports the United States dropped an average of 72 bombs every day, the equivalent of 3 an hour in 2016, according to an analysis of American strikes around the world from the Council on Foreign Relations. According to the New York City-based think tank, 26,171 bombs were dropped on Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, and Pakistan during the year. Some 24,287 bombs were used in Iraq and Syria. In 2015, the U.S. dropped 22,110 bombs in Iraq and Syria, the Council on Foreign Relations reported. The United States of America contributes directly to the global war refugee crisis by dropping bombs on Afghanistan, Pakistan, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, and Syria. German and Swedish officials risk political capital by accepting refugees from the nations currently being attacked and invaded by the United States of America. President Donald Trump creates consecutive executive orders banning travel among people who would like to escape the bombs he's dropping in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, and Syria. Conservative capitalist Christian Republicans in the United States support Donald Trump's attacks on African and Middle Eastern nations, just like left-wing liberal Democrats supported President Obama's attacks on the same nations. President Donald Trump fired FBI Director James Comey for his handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation in 2016. President Trump previously praised Comey for how he handled the Hillary Clinton email investigation. James Comey really does deserve to be fired for how he handled the Clinton email investigation, but it looks bad when President Trump fires the guy for the same reason he praised him. And why did President Obama let James Comey so publicly fumble the investigation and promote it so badly? The James Comey firing line distracts attention from more pressing matters that receive less treatment from U.S. commercial news and influential comedians. NBC News reports President Donald Trump has approved a plan to arm the Syrian Kurdish militia. Chief Pentagon spokesman Dana White says the Syrian Democratic Force, partnered with enabling support from U.S. and coalition forces, are the only force on the ground that can successfully seize Raqqa in the near future. In March, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson traveled to Turkey to meet with President Erdogan, who sees the Syrian Democratic Force as terrorists. The Kurdish Project reports the Syrian Democratic Force is led by the Kurdish People's Protection Units, also known as the YPG. NBC says Erdogan sees the YPG as terrorists and equivalent to PKK Kurdish separatists who are blamed for attacks inside Turkey. The news about the U.S. plan to arm Syrian Kurds comes as the Trump administration mulls sending as many as 5,000 more troops to Afghanistan. The U.S. war in Afghanistan has been killing people since 2001. President Trump will send more people to kill and die in Afghanistan. In the U.S. proxy war in Syria, President Trump supports the anti-government militia called the Syrian Democratic Force, just like President Obama supported the anti-government militia called the Free Syrian Army. The Free Syrian Army gave weapons it received from the United States to a militia group called Al-Nusra. Al-Nusra is considered a terrorist group by the United States of America. Even though their names sound great by American standards for freedom and democracy, the Free Syrian Army and the Syrian Democratic Forces, also known as the YPG, are anti-government militias paid by the Pentagon for killing people in Syria. People who watch too many Star Wars movies tend to believe rebels are always the good guys. People who wave the Confederate flag tend to believe rebels are always the good guys. Presidents who send soldiers to kill people in Syria tend to believe rebels are always the good guys. Keep that in mind as American commercial news and influential comedians promote the F.B.I. Jim Comey Roast, brought to you by the Washington, D.C.
ISIS, Islamic State. We should stop calling it ISIS or ISIL or Daesh. Just call it the Islamic State. Just say it, Islamic State. Just call it that, whether it stands for Islam or not. This is what these folks calling themselves, the Islamic State. The USA loves the FSA. They love them. Free Syrian Army. They love those guys. The FSA. The USA loves the FSA. They love them. Free Syrian Army. They love those guys. The FSA. Obama gets on national television, delaying the NFL game while these Steelers just beating the heck out of the Colts. He delayed that maybe. But nonetheless, talking about just how he's going to keep doing the same old thing. No ground troops except for these special guys, and we're going to keep doing these airstrikes, and, it's an ideology. Islamic State, ISIL, Daesh. So that's the way he's bringing it, the same thing. These right-wingers saying, well, it's not enough. It's not enough. But there's really nothing to do. There isn't. Because people, if you look at it, you're going to find USA loves the FSA. They love them. Free Syrian Army. They love those guys. The FSA. USA loves the FSA. They love them. Free Free Syrian Army, they love those guys. The FSA? Well, the USA hates al-Nusra. They hate al-Nusra, the terrorist group, but the Free Syrian Army loves al-Nusra. They love those guys. The United States hates ISIS. Well, al-Nusra hates ISIS. They're fighting those guys too. So al-Nusra is fighting ISIS. The U.S. is fighting ISIS. They hate ISIS, but the Free Syrian Army loves the United States, and they love al-Nusra, but the United States hates al-Nusra. But al-Nusra is fighting ISIS. It's completely crazy. It's completely crazy. The U.S. hates Assad. ISIS, the Islamic State, they hate Assad. They hate that mug. The U.S. hates Assad. ISIS, the Islamic State, they hate Assad. They hate that mug. You're going to find the United States, their policy over there, it makes no sense. It's completely schizophrenic. It's completely crazy. Listen to this. Assad hates the Islamic State. Russia hates the Islamic State. Russia loves Assad. Assad loves Russia. Russia and Assad hate the Free Syrian Army. Russia and Assad hate the USA. The U.S. loves some rebel groups. Assad hates all rebel groups. The U.S. loves some rebel groups. Russia hates all rebel groups. So agree with it or not, the Russian-Assad alliance at least follows some sort of straightforward logic. The United States foreign policy in Syria to combat the Islamic State is pure schizophrenia. It's completely crazy. Get hip to what's happening in the world with the Dean J television show every Saturday at 5 p.m. on Access Fort Wayne 2, right before the Fort Report with News Sentinel writer Kevin Leininger. The Dean J television show presents news, social commentary, music, and entertainment from Summit City Noise producer Dean Robinson, also known as Summit City music recording artist Dean J. Watch the Dean J television show every Saturday at 5 p.m. right before the Fort Report with News Sentinel writer Kevin Leininger on Access Fort Wayne 2. Access Fort Wayne 2 is Comcast Channel 57 and Frontier Channel 27. Consult your local TV listings, Facebook, and YouTube for the Dean J television show.